Okay, so Shavua Tov, everyone, again. Welcome back. I'm sorry that we missed our class last week, but here we are. We're back, and we are studying Perek Gimel, chapter 3 of Yehoshua. So just a quick reminder. 3 weeks ago, we saw in Perek Aleph, we basically saw the introduction or the opening of the entire book. And in some ways, we saw it not only as the opening of the entire book, in some ways we saw it as an opening to this whole new stage of the prophets, meaning the transition. We saw the first chapter basically creating this transitional stage between Moshe Rabbeinu and the 5 books, and the next stage, which is represented by Joshua, by Yehoshua, and the prophets. And we saw that the 3 main emphases will be from this point on, seem to be the challenge of the three legs, okay, of the national existence, which is the land, the Torah, meaning the observance of the Torah, and the nation. And that's what we saw in chapter 1. Second chapter, we saw the story of the spies. And we spoke at length about the differences between the first set of spies, the 12 spies who went, and everyone knew that they went. It was very public, and the goals of the original spies versus the spies that Joshua sends, and what is revealed to them through the meeting with Rachav. And we spoke, especially at the end of the class, Paul. Kind of at the last minute of the class, we kind of cracked something very important over there, which is the conviction that we have about our own belief and our own right for the land and to our identity. That is, at the end of the day, that is the basis based on which we handle ourselves when we come to the other nations, and that creates the right dynamic, etc. Okay, that's it. Just wanted to make sure we all remember where we are. As far as the story is concerned, they're about to cross the Jordan, right? We saw that chapter 1 and chapter 2 basically overlap. They both talk about the 3 days. It's the same 3 days. The same 3 days that the people are preparing to cross the river are the same 3 days that the spies are spying. That's it. Now we're in chapter 3. Any comments, questions, any points before we start today's chapter? Okay. You guys can hear me though, right? You're not just, you can hear me though, right? Because no one's saying anything. What?
We have no questions at this point.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Batya has a question.
Okay.
A short comment. It started with the word Vayashkem. When he stood up in the morning, it's similar to Vayashkem Abraham Baboker.
Right.
So each time it says Vayashkem, there is a definitive action afterwards.
Right. Vayashkem usually means not just, meaning why do you have to say, like the first word here is just, it's an interesting word, and every time this word is used, Vayashkem, and it appears in a lot of places, we understand that it's a significant word. Because why do I need to point out that he woke up in the morning? Obviously, it could just say, they left from the Shittim. Why do you have to say he woke up? What, is it possible that a person's traveling from place A to place B without waking up in the morning? So there's a good example of a pretty mundane word that we understand means more than it's saying. And usually it means that it's said to be that they're getting up with vigor and with enthusiasm, and they're making sure to do what?
Alacrity.
Yes. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and start. Wait just a second. Let me just get my pages in order here. Okay.
And we have the Bilam that's the same, right?
The what?
Didn't Bilam wake up the same way in a negative way?
Yes, correct. And Joshua rose up early in the morning, and they moved from Shittim and came to the Jordan, he and all the people of Israel, and they lodged before they crossed over. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to read from verse 1 all the way until the end of chapter 8. Verse 8. We're going to read the first 8 verses. First 8 verses. Okay? And then we're going to ask questions about it and see and try to identify a structure that's going on here. And it was at the end of the 3 days that the officers went through the midst of the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of Hashem your God, and the priests the Levites bearing it, then you shall move from your place and go after it. But there shall be a distance between you and it, just 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you will go, for you have not passed this way before. And Joshua said to the people, prepare yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua said to the priests, saying, carry the ark of the covenant, and pass before the people. And they carried the ark of the covenant and went before the people. And Hashem said to Joshua, this day I will begin to make you great in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moshe, so will I be with you. And you shall command the priests that bear the ark of the covenant, saying, when you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. Okay, so it's a long we just read a lot, okay? But I think you'll see soon why it is I chose to read from verse 1 to verse 8. Questions, comments, observations? Yes?
It seems that it was some kind of meuma.
Meaning?
Because we see marshals circulated in the midst of the camp. Nobody told them to do. Usually we know Moshe is saying to people, do this and this. But here it's like they decided to go between people and tell them what to do. And what do you mean? My question, how much is how many, it's like 1 kilometer. They have to be between.
Oh, more. No, more. Much more. You're saying to go from one edge to the camp to the other edge of the camp. Oh, much more than a kilometer. You're talking about I don't remember the exact distance, but more than a kilometer. Sure. You're talking about over 3 million people.
No. It's not what I'm asking. The distance between the ark and the people.
Oh,
and
yeah.
People are going to see, and especially they say the way that you're going to walk now, you never went this way before. So if you want to see exactly what to do, you have to see it closer. But they say
no. On that point, your first point I'll get back to, which I think is an excellent point. This point, I'm not sure I agree, because if you're talking about a open space, which is mountainous, if you're so close, if you're in the middle of the camp or in the back of the camp, you can't see the ark if it's close by. But if something that's further away, everyone can see it. Right? The larger the distance, if it's very, very close and you're going up a hill and down a hill, if it's further away in the distance, then more people will be able to see it.
Okay.
You're right. 2,000 cubits is about 1 kilometer. That's not that far. A person could see a kilometer away, especially if it's a group of people. You won't be able to see it all the time if they're going down a valley and then up. But if it's close, if the ark is 100 feet away from the edge of the camp, how many people will be able to see it? Just the people in the very front. But if it's off a little bit of the distance, more people will be able to see it. But I want to get back to your first point. Your first point, you said that it seems a bit of you used the word mehuma, which I guess means it seems a bit messy. Or more accurately, maybe it seems unorderly. Right? So it looks a little unorderly because, and I think you hit the nail on its head, but from the opposite side. What do I mean by that? Because you said we're used to, in the desert, Hashem says something to Moshe, and then Moshe tells the people. Or Moshe tells the Joshua or Aaron's sons, and then they go tell the people. Okay? So you assume, your question shows, okay, you're old school. You assume that if that's the way it was during the time of Moshe, that's the way it should be, also during the time of Joshua. But we need to remember what we saw in chapter 1 and 2. That something fundamental has changed, or is changing. Because look, what is the direction of the events here? You're right. We are used to the order being Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe lemor. Hashem said to Moshe to say to the people. And then Moshe tells Aaron, or Aaron and his sons, or Moshe tells the people, or Moshe tells the heads of the tribes, and the heads of the tribes tell the people. But what's the order here? What's the order of who's speaking to whom? Verse 2.
Marshals, yes.
Right, the officers command the people. Verse 5. Joshua tells the people, and then Joshua is speaking to the Kohanim. And last, in verse 7 and 8, Hashem speaks to Joshua. It is exactly reverse. This is a perfect example where you just read it and you don't notice and you think, yeah, it looks a little messy. It's not a coincidence. It is exactly the opposite of what we're used to. Right? Yes, Sylvia.
Yep.
But is the order of the Psukim right? Because in Pasuk Aleph it says they arrived at the Jordan, but then in Pasuk 8 it says when you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you should stand in the Jordan.
No. Verse 8. Wait. Go ahead and finish your question.
So, and then it also talks about the 3 days. Are we past the 3 days already? Are these new 3 days?
Okay, excellent question. Excellent point. There's a lot of different attempts to answer that. I think from this, the simplest understanding is it's the same 3 days. We've already said the last class that the order of the chapters is not chronological. Chapter 1 appears out of place, and that's what we said. That's the big chiddush that we had at the end of last class. That why would the prophet put chapter 1, which happened later, why would it put it first? And we said because history is not just a question of the physical, and this is a very important point when studying Tanakh, that history, and especially history in the way that the Torah is teaching it, it's not just a question of what are the factual things that happened, what are the physics of what happened. Rather, what is the memory, what is the effect, what is the impact that the events have on us. It says that is the significance of a story. That is the significance of what Torah is trying to teach us. Not just to give us a documentary of the events, rather to what is the significance of it. And therefore, for the purposes of introducing the book of Joshua, for the purpose of introducing us to the next stage in the relationship between God and the Jewish people, chapter 1 had to come first because of its message, even if it didn't happen first. So the actual order of the chapters is chapter 2 came first, then chapter 3, and then chapter 1. Meaning, right before they were going to cross the Jordan, Hashem said to Joshua, my servant Moshe has passed away, and you shall be strong and overcome, and you shall be strong and overcome, and you shall be strong and overcome. Okay? So, but what you're pointing out, verse 8 is not also is not equal to verse 1, because in verse 1 they came to the edge of the Jordan. In verse 8, what Hashem is saying to Joshua is the next step. Okay, meaning up until verse 8, they're camping at the bank. Okay, verse 8 says, when the Kohanim extend their feet one more step into the bank of the river, right? When you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. Meaning, the moment they put their feet, the Kohanim who are carrying the ark, the moment they dip their feet in the water, meaning they're still on the Jordanian side, the eastern side, and we'll get this is an important point when we get to the end of the chapter. While they're still standing outside the land of Israel, the moment their feet touch the water, they should stand still. Okay? Okay. So, yeah, Paul.
Some of this just seems very reminiscent of Sinai. The keeping the distance, the 3 days, the preparation.
I agree. And obviously, and the fact that the waters are going to split, which is obviously very reminiscent of Kriyat Yamsuf. And I agree. And it seems, and this is what Batya mentioned before, and we will get back to this much more so soon when we continue with the chapter, that there seems to be almost a reminiscence, but we'll see, with significant changes, and they're very important changes. But there seems to be almost an attempt to make to relive or recreate the most significant events of the previous generation, right? Of the generation that left. It's because it's not the same generation. It's not the same generation, but so obviously there's some significance in the similarity, but obviously the much more interesting thing will be to see what are the differences, right? And we'll talk about them, and that's going to be the main thing we're going to be looking for. But I agree with you that yes, there's a lot of words, terms, structures. It's like, yeah, it's very clear that Hashem is trying to create a certain type of, either to relive the memory or to awaken within them the same types of I don't know, same type of atmosphere, same type of effect and affect that was back then in those momentous events, right? By the way, when you say in verse 5, and Joshua said to the people, "Prepare yourselves." In the Hebrew, it says hitkadashu. That is the exact word. That's the exact verb that is used before Har Sinai. That's the exact word that's used. That they should become kadosh in preparation of kedusha for 3 days to prepare themselves for the revelation.
Yes.
Right? And this is also, and Joshua says, why? Because God is going to reveal himself. There's going to be a great revelation. There's going to be wonders, which is obviously, you're right, very, very reminiscent of Matan Torah, where there was this amazing event, this huge event. It was miraculous and filled with wonders. Okay, so here's the question: what is the significance of the reversal of the order? Because as Galina, as you said, normally God says to Moshe, Moshe says to the officers, the officers say to the people. Over here, so here's the question for this section: what is the significance of that reversal? The officers tell the people, Joshua tells the people, and God speaks, and then God speaks to Joshua. What's the significance of that reversal? Yes.
I think it's just simple. It's bagrut. You are coming now to Eretz Israel, and you have to make decisions on your own. Of course, it has to be in the frame of Jewish law, as it supposed to be, but still, you have to, it's different. I took care of you in desert, you ate man, but now you have to grow bread and vegetables and fruits and build, and you have to decide what to do. You cannot ask me, like child, what to do now. And that's why he just tells them,
yes, I agree. I think that is very clearly what's going on here, which is, but it's interesting. It's not as if, anyone told them, okay, you need to take the initiative. They don't need to be told. They're just taking the initiative. It's a different generation. It's the generation that is quite obviously finally ready to go into the land and not be completely dependent on, not only not completely dependent on Hashem, not even be completely dependent on a leader. And it's just happening. That's it. Yes.
I have a question. I heard something like before the Jews entered to the Israel, everybody did tshuva. Is it true, or it was the condition?
What? That before coming into the land they all did tshuva?
Yeah.
Where do you see that?
No, they did some couple of lectures. So somebody told me that.
So I would ask the person who said that lecture, where does he see such a thing?
Okay, I'll check.
Meaning, I would say the fact. Meaning, when they say, prepare for 3 days. We actually saw in chapter 1 that when he said prepare, he actually said prepare food. Because the moment we cross over, we need to make our own food, and we're going to be waging war. So, if someone comes and says yes, they use those 3 days to do tshuva, I would ask them, maybe from verse 5 it says hitkadashu, prepare yourself spiritually. So maybe someone could say that is tshuva, but there's nothing in the text to indicate anything like that. And if that was a condition, then it should be explicitly said. Meaning, to come and say that it's a condition, there's nothing to indicate that. If you want to come and say, oh, it's not a condition, but maybe it happened, maybe you could connect it. But to say that it's a condition, maybe there is such a midrash, very possible. But in the text, in the pshat, in the words themselves, there's not a single word that seems to even hint towards it. And when we get to the end of the chapter, I will prove that it is exactly the opposite. But based on what we saw so far, all I have to say to that is, where's the proof? I don't see any indication of that. When we get to the end of the chapter, I will prove the exact opposite. But we'll see at the end. Yes. Sorry, Galina, yes. Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
it's just what you are saying about, it's different kind of people standing on the bridge of getting into Eretz Yisrael, because when you're going back to Exodus, and you're looking at the part when Israel panics, it's written, is this not the statement that we made to you in Egypt, saying, let us be, and we will serve Egypt? It means that even people, we know that only fifth of the Jewish people left Egypt. Even this fifth, they still didn't go to live.
Right. Yep, it's a different generation. Okay. So,
Rabbi,
yes, please.
The different generation. These new generations still followed Moshe through the desert for 40 years. So I still think it's remarkable that they can turn over in basically a very short period of time from being, orders coming from Hashem through Moshe to them, to the turnaround, and do it. In business with change management, it's very hard to turn people 180 degrees and do things differently. And I appreciate it's not the same generation that left Egypt, but it's the same generation that went through the desert and took instruction from Moshe, from Hashem.
It's a good point. It's an excellent point. No, I would have to think about it because as you're pointing that out, I would say two thoughts come to mind, and I haven't really thought this through. Two thoughts come to mind. For those who are watching us on Facebook, I'll just repeat Paul's question or observation. Paul is saying, yes, okay, it's a new generation, and as we can very clearly see, it's a generation that, as Galina said, is more mature, more independent, unlike the dependency of the freed slaves who didn't necessarily know what to do with independence because they were already too accustomed to accepting, authority. But this generation, just a week ago, they were still under Moshe's leadership, and were still accustomed for the last 10, 15, 20, whatever years, they were still accustomed to following, one authority and one centralized authority. So from an organizational perspective, if you want, for them to go from being, to follow one leader to suddenly taking initiative, even it's still. So I would say two thoughts. One, I'd say that I think it deserves contemplation to see if we can detect in the book of Dvarim and Bamidbar, quite possibly, I'm just thinking out loud, examples of where this generation was very different than the previous generation, and that we would see in the desert, possibly. This is something that needs to be looked. Could we find already in the stage in the Torah, in Parashat Chukat, which is where the generations kind of switch and the Torah just skips 38 years, would we suddenly find more of an independence of the people in the way they behave with Moshe? I don't know. I think it deserves...
That would be helpful.
It would require investigation to come and check to see. And the second thought that comes to mind is that, that sometimes... I'll use an example, a theoretical example. So it happens a lot of times. That you're in an organization. I'll use the example of a school or a shul where you have a very significant figure who has been the leader of the community or of the school or of the organization, who was the founding person or was a very, very significant person that everyone has a tremendous respect for. And you come to a certain point where kind of everyone knows, okay, it's time. We need new leadership, but no one is actually going to come and say, and everyone's still following the leader out of respect because this person deserves the respect. He really does deserve it because it's his company, it's his community. It is. Everything is things that there's a sense of gratitude and a sense of obligation and hakarat tov to this person, which is well deserved. And therefore people say, okay, we'll wait. We'll wait until this person is gone, until they know it's time, or until whatever happens. And in the meantime, we'll just follow him because we believe in him and because he deserves it and because we still have what to learn, and we'll just, appreciate him until the last moment that we still can. But the moment that the person's gone, okay, we all know it's time to turn over a new leaf. So I think this is not an uncommon...
I can relate to it in life experiences, but it's just a very beautiful answer about the fact that we don't see it, but the preparation has been happening in the background, even if we can't find something.
Right, but I think we could, but I would have to think about it. I'll just read. I have a comment here from Oleg. Well, sometime, just 1 second. I have a comment here from Oleg. He wrote the following: well, sometimes people are ready to be on their own, like grown-up children, but they are still bound by custom, and once the head of the family is gone, they are free to do what they want. Okay, very similar to what we just said. Yes?
Can it be the example with the change of the change that you just spoke about it with the rock? Because in the first time,
yes,
God tells him, hit the rock. Second time, it doesn't speak to the rock. And Moshe, he is not speaking, he's just hitting the rock.
You're right.
Because he doesn't
yes,
speak.
but you're right. But there's nothing different there necessarily about the behavior of the people. That's more about Hashem giving us the message, Hashem saying, I Hashem know that you, the people, are no longer in the same place. That you are a different generation and you need different leadership. And here Moshe has failed at transitioning to a different type of leadership, and therefore he's not going to take you into the land of Israel. But although it would be interesting to look, and I think there is evidence for this, to see what is the language that was used by the people when they asked for water the first time versus the next generation the second time. But that was an interesting thing to check out at a different time. Okay, so I would like us to continue. So we see here a reversal of the I wouldn't say the chain of command, but the independence and initiative of the people, that they understand what needs to be done, and they have a general understanding, the officers, of what's going to be done, and therefore they just go and they tell the people. And even if we're not even completely sure in what is the chronological order of these verses, the fact that they are presented in this order sends a very clear message. I do think they also happen in this chronological order, but there's a good example where the method in which, or the style in which it's being written in itself holds a certain important message to us who are reading it and noticing, as you did, Galina, what's going on here? This is so different than what we're used to. Yeah, it's because it's different. And we need to get into the mindset as we're reading these and going, that things are going to be very different as we enter the land of Israel and as we leave the desert. And it's going to be more dependent on the people. There'll be more room and more of an expectation that the people themselves take initiative. That, of course, opens up, as we'll see later on, much more room for mistake, much more room for error. Fine. That's part of the challenge. That's why be strong and overcome. Be strong and overcome. Okay. Okay, we're continuing to verse 9. Okay, we're now going to read verses 9 till 13. And Joshua said to the children of Israel, "Come here and hear the words of Hashem your God." Oh wait, I want to point out one more thing. All the verses that we saw before, the content, even though they were slightly different from each other, the main content of what was being said was very simple: be prepared. Right? It's technical preparation. The officer said to the people, "Here are your instructions. Here are your, quite literally, here are your marching orders. The ark is going to be in this location. You need to be able to see it and follow it, and don't get too close so you don't get lost." It's very technical, right? Just be prepared for what's going to happen. And then Yehoshua says to the people also, he prepares them. It's not so technical. Over here, he's preparing them spiritually. This is what you need to lead Kadesh. You need to sanctify yourself and prepare yourself. Okay? Why? Because something momentous is going to happen. It's still about being prepared. And Hashem is preparing Joshua for what? For what's going to happen to Joshua. I'm going to make sure that your status is solidified in the eyes of the people. Wait, why is Hashem saying this to Yehoshua? He's preparing him. Say, this is also part of what's going on. Hashem is saying to Joshua, part of this is about solidifying your position. So it's about everyone's preparing everyone. Okay? Now we come to verse 9. And Joshua said to the children of Israel, "Come here and hear the words of Hashem your God." Right? This is already a lot more familiar. This is kind of going back to the old style of what we're familiar with, right? And Joshua said, "By this you shall know that the living God is in your midst. And he will certainly drive out the Canaanites and the Hittim and the and the Chivim, and the Perizzites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Jebusites from before you. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing ahead of you in the Jordan. And now take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, a man for every tribe. And it shall be when the soles of the feet of the priests that bear the ark of Hashem, Lord of all the earth, rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters of Jordan shall be cut. The waters that come down from above shall stand in one heap. Okay. Observations, questions, comments about what is going on here.
First of all, in this particular part that you just read, it's written the God, the Master of the universe twice. It wasn't before. It looks like they thought it's our God and it's just between us and nobody, he has no deal to do with another nations. But he says, no. He's the master of the universe. And another one, what does it mean that the ark of Hashem is, it looks like by itself, it moves not through the water, near the water of the river. It's like nobody holds it.
You're right. In verse 11, it says, "Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing." It almost it doesn't say the it should say the priests, will cross with the ark. It almost seems as if the ark itself, the emphasis here is on the ark, as if the Kohanim don't exist. Okay, Oleg's point asks the following question: What was the purpose of these 12 men? So that question, we're going to have to wait for the full answer till the next class, because in chapter 4. Okay, but we can still offer some suggestions. But the full answer, because we're not going to fully see what these 12 people do until we get to the next chapter. Yes, Paul.
That's kind of related to that, because I'm trying to remember when the Sea of Reeds split. Wasn't it one individual who put his foot in the cause the split?
Would anyone like to disagree with Paul?
Rebut.
To rebut, yes. Paul is jumping forward, which is good, and trying to find the similarities or differences between this and Kriyat Yamsuf, the splitting of the Sea of Reeds. And he's saying, also over there, this is reminiscent of Kriyat Yamsuf, when one person. So he's saying, the difference is over here, it's 12 people, over there it was one. Would someone like to offer a rebuttal?
I don't understand the idea.
What caused the split of the Sea of Reeds, of the Yamsuf? My understanding was it was one individual whose name escapes me.
Nachshon.
Nachshon put his foot in and went up to his neck, and then they split. As opposed to here, where there's an assignment to the 12 tribes, and lead of each tribe. So
the rebuttal, because it's an important point, because the difference is much, much more significant, because that story does not appear in the Psukim.
Alex's point behind me here. Saying it's a midrash.
That is a midrash.
I may not have heard it.
No. And hopefully now it is a midrash that says that Nachshon jumped in, and when the water got to the tip of his nose as he was about to drown, then that caused the opening of the sea. It's a very nice midrash. It's a beautiful midrash that is very, very significant, but it is the opposite. It is complete opposite of the actual story. What action triggered the splitting of the sea of Yamsuf? What action triggered it?
It was Moshe Rabbeinu with his stick.
Correct. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even hit the water, he lifted his stick over Neteh yadcha al hayam, al hamayim, right? That he held his staff over the sea. Okay, so it was what?
And then the wind came, and
correct.
After,
and then
the whole night,
right, and then wind came, and for the entire night, the wind somehow caused the splitting of the sea. Okay, so if we were to go back a year, and we were still in our midrash class, then we would discuss what is the origin of that midrash. What is what in the text does it somehow connect to, or what does it connect to as far as the larger context of the chapter there, and what is its purpose and what is its message? Okay, but we're not going to do that. But we are going to point out that the difference is very significant, because over there Moshe, the leader, did an action, and over here the Kohanim themselves. That is a perfect, one more good example of the shift and the tremendous change that the generations are going through, and the tremendous change that happens when entering the land of Israel. That even the miracles are triggered, either actually done or at least triggered by the people themselves. Okay? And obviously this is a very, we can imagine that the people know the difference, and they know that the last time Moshe Rabbeinu stood up there with his staff, and over here it's being done in a very public way. And maybe that is the beginning of the answer to Oleg's question, the significance of the 12 men. To make a big deal, that every single, make a big deal out of the fact that the Kohanim, we'll see later on, that the 12 people actually created they took 12 stones and they put them right by the feet of the priests where they stood. Like a monument was built in the location where the Kohanim stepped into the river. Yes, Galina?
Through what people will know that living God in their midst? What exactly, because it's written, through this you will know. What exactly?
Great question. I don't know, what do you think?
Where is the pasuk? Which pasuk?
It's, no, it's 10.
10?
No, it's yours.
10.
It's yours.
So I think the simple meaning is, when you witness the supernatural miracle, this will serve for you, meaning a supernatural miracle. Our basic assumption is that if it's a supernatural miracle, that this is being done by God. And this will serve, once you witness this will create for you a certainty that God will also help you conquer and beat all of these nations. That seems to be the simplest understanding of it. Meaning a living God. What does that mean, a living God? Meaning a God who is active in the events that are happening to you. Because this is not a natural event that the waters should stop in such a way. And therefore, look, God is active in the events happening. And if God is active in the events that are happening, then He will continue to be active and help us drive out the Canaanites, the Hittites, and going into this land, which we now need to fight and battle and conquer. That I think is the simplest way to read it.
I think it's here in the continuation. It shall happen just as the soles of the feet of the Kohanim, the verse of God, rest in the water. I think this is the answer.
That what?
At the moment they will step into the water, we will see the miracle, and you will see.
Yep.
Because it looks the continuation.
Yep. Okay, now we're going to come to the best part. We're going to read verses 14 to 17. And please be on the lookout for what are the the similarities and the differences between this event and the splitting of the Sea of Reeds, of Yam Suf. Okay? And it was when the people moved from their tents to cross the Jordan, and the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant were before the people. And when the bearers of the Ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bore the Ark were dipped in the edge of the water, and the Jordan overflows all its banks all the time of the harvest. And the waters which came down from above stood and rose up in one column, very far from Adam, the city which is beside Zarethan. And those that descended to the sea of the plain, the salt sea, the Dead Sea, were completely cut off, and the people passed over opposite Jericho. And the priests that bore the Ark of the Covenant of Hashem stood firm, arranged on the dry land in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel passed over on dry ground until the whole nation had completely passed over the Jordan. So before we talk about similarities and differences, any questions, any difficulties in the text, any comments before we talk about all the differences and similarities? I'll tell you what. Yeah. Yes, please.
This sounds like, what should I say, much better orchestrated.
Better orchestrated?
Better orchestrated.
And choreographed.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
Much better orchestrated.
Wait. When you say, Batya, when you say, I agree with you 100%, but I want to understand exactly what you mean. What do you mean when you say better orchestrated? Explain.
Better orchestrated because, well, it's a fact that the first time they were running from Paro,
Excellent.
under panic, they are going to, and well, it's not such an extraordinary event. This is the second time. It's the second time. So there is something in the conscience of the people that
Yes.
happens.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. So we're skipping ahead a little bit, which is fine. So you're saying, first thing you're saying, okay, Oleg, I'll get to the comment in a second. It's an excellent point. So Batya, you're saying, wait, what was the first point you said, Batya? You said? Yeah, it was better orchestrated. Right. The first time they were panicked. There was a sense of no one knows what's going on. Over here, not only is the order, they were prepared for it. They were told, we are going to cross the river. You have 3 days to prepare for it. The ark will go in front of you. Everyone knew exactly what's going to happen. Maybe they didn't know exactly if it would split or not, if they would go over a bridge, but they knew they were going to cross the Jordan River. Right? And Joshua told them, you are going to see wonders. And they're not fleeing from the enemy, rather, they're charging forwards. They're charging forwards towards the enemy. It's the exact opposite. It's turned on its head.
One second. This is a very nice, very nice frame to understand how the middleman is important. This is the first time they have a kind of witness about what is happening right now, what we are experiencing right now. The middlemen are the Kohanim. The Kohanim are standing strong and allowing them to pass. They are present.
Right.
They are a presence.
Right.
They are a witness. They are like, what is the word? Allowing it. They are.
They're facilitating it.
Facilitators, yeah.
Okay, I just want to read, Galina, just beforehand, I want to read what Oleg wrote. It's a very important point. He wrote the following: looks like the river was stopped far away, so people would not be able to fully see the miracle. So I partially agree. if you look at verse 16, the waters that came down from above, meaning, right, the Jordan, it flows from north to south. So when it says above, it means north, right? And it means, and it says that it went down, that it descended, it means that it's flowing south towards Yam HaMelach. So, but it says, and the waters which came down from above stood and rose up in one column, very far from Adam, the city which is beside Zaratan, and those that descended to the sea of the plain, the Dead Sea, were completely cut off. So there's a lot of discussion to try to figure out where these locations are. But I agree with Oleg that basically all they saw is suddenly the water stopped flowing. Meaning they saw suddenly water just stopped. Meaning they didn't see, before that, I want to point out that wherever the water did stop, if you were standing where the water stopped, you would see one pillar of water. I think it's very visually, it's in contrast. What did we see in Yam Suf? 2 walls.
Correct.
We were surrounded by two massive walls of water. And you're walking, and every single step you take, you're staring at something wondrous. Every single step they took, they have these 2 walls of water that are defying logic and science, defying gravity. But when they're walking now in the Jordan River, what do they actually see? Nothing. They don't see anything. They just see dry land. Meaning, when the Kohanim stepped in, it's unclear. It's 2 possibilities. Possibility 1 is that all the water coming down from up north just started accumulating next to them and became high, and all the water from their feet down just continued flowing down. And then, so option 1 is they're walking, and on one side they have a big wall of water, and on the other side there's nothing. Option 2, what?
Just drained.
Yeah, just drained. But even in that option, they only have one wall of water. But another option, which I tend to understand that this is what it's saying, is that the location where the water actually stopped and started accumulating was not actually right there, is further up north. And we will see later on in chapter 5, if you guys, those of you, I'll just read for you. In chapter 5, it says, in chapter 5, sorry, just one moment. And then we're almost done. Here, chapter 5 says the following. It happened that when all the Amorite kings who were on the western side of the Jordan, and all the Canaanite kings who were by the sea, heard that Hashem had dried up the Jordan's waters for the sake of the children of Israel. This was a very public display, but not necessarily, not exclusively for the Jewish people, but just as much for the other nations, to make an impression on them. What I'm saying is it's very possible when the Jews themselves walked through, all they saw was dry land. And that the most miraculous part of it, the most obvious miracle aspect of the miracle, was not even witnessed by them. And that would fit quite well. Or at least, if you don't want to go that far, at least it wasn't as miraculous as the splitting of the Red Sea, of the Sea of Reeds, where there were 2 things defying nature, but half. On one side, the water continued behaving like water, and it just continued going. So there's this contrast. By us, the Jewish people were prepared for it. The Jewish people are the ones who triggered it. And the miracle was either half as much of a supernatural miracle, or not at all as obvious. Still a miracle, obviously, that 5 minutes ago there was water here and now there isn't water. But they're not staring at two pillars of water that are defying gravity. And remember, to cross the Jordan, the distance is, in some places, could be 10 meters, 30 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet. In the widest part of the Jordan back then, it was wider than it is today because it wasn't dammed up and water wasn't being taken out of it. I'm taking maybe, I don't know, 150 feet would be this is not like crossing the, and other nations witnessed it. Whereas Yam Suf, other than the Egyptians who drowned in it, we don't know for a fact that anyone else saw it. Yes, Galina.
That it was another kind of miracle, because when you're reading text, from the beginning it's written that the feet of the Kohanim just immersed into the water. And then suddenly it's written that they stood still in the middle. They stood still in the middle of the dry land in the Jordan River.
So, no, they're still standing, and we'll see this. It's an important point. They are standing at the edge. In the middle of the Jordan, in the sense that the middle going not in its width, in the middle as far as its length. They're still standing on the edge. And this
along
is what
the shore. Along the
No,
shore.
because 17 it's written, the Kohanim, the bearers of the ark, stood firmly on the dry ground in the middle of the Jordan.
right.
I think if the Jordan runs from here to here, they were here. It's still on the shore.
So if you no, but also if you look at the Hebrew, it says betoch hayarden, which means in the Jordan. The word middle does not appear in the Hebrew. It says inside. It doesn't say in the middle. That word, it does not appear in the Hebrew. I want to point out one more thing, okay, which is a very important point. And this is a crucial point. So again, this chapter so far has really continued to solidify this reversal in every aspect in how the nation is kind of like structuring itself now and starting to behave, both as far as how they start moving and the hierarchy and the jobs, but also in the way in which the miracle takes place. The miracle is God's action. God is allowing or creating the miracle to happen in a way which is less super duper miraculous. The people are triggering it. The people are prepared for it. So if you're prepared for a miracle, it's not as much shock and awe. It's not something which comes in and beats you into submission of faith. It is one that you're prepared for emotionally, spiritually. It is something that builds you up constructively, preparing you for what's next. You're charging towards the enemy, and this is boosting your confidence versus kind of like just kind of like, okay, I want to point out one more. I want to point out one more very crucial thing. The moment the entire nation actually finishes to cross, the chapter ends. What is the picture that we see when the chapter ends? The entire nation is on the other side of the Jordan River, meaning the entire nation is in the land of Israel. But where is the ark? And where are the priests with the ark?
The ark stays beyond.
Correct.
Until last person crosses.
Correct. So at the end, the chapter ends, the entire Jewish people, this is a very crucial point, with a very important message. For those few minutes, we'll see it's more than a few minutes, because then we'll see in chapter 4 there's a whole ceremony that takes place. The entire Jewish people are in the land of Israel. But where is the ark of in the ark of the covenant are the luchot, is Torah. God's presence lay in the ark. So for this single scene, and here's my proof that there was no condition for tshuva, quite the opposite. Can you guys still see me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Wait. Do you see what I'm saying? For a moment, the first stage of the Jewish people entering the land of Israel happens without the Torah. The Jewish people, for a moment, for at least a certain stage, the Jewish people enter the land of Israel and are in the land of Israel without the Torah, without the Luchot, without the Ark. The Ark and the Torah are still in Chutz La'aretz. They're still outside of Israel. This is my absolute proof that there was no condition for tshuva. Quite the opposite. We shouldn't think that the only connection we have to the land is because we're doing the right thing. No, our connection to the land transcends and predates our connection to Torah. Remember, Abraham was promised the land before we received Torah. Now, and this is a very important point. And when you come, and I'm going to get political here. Now, here's my political disclaimer. When you come and you talk about the division or religious approaches or rabbinical approaches to Zionism, this chapter and this scene, in my mind, is a perfect way to understand the correct perspective, which is there's this moment with the entire, meaning, why wouldn't it be, I would think, if you went with a more Haredi approach, okay, you would say that the ark should cross first and enter the land of Israel, and then the Jewish people would, and the whole nation would follow. Or that they would cross the Jordan and stand at the edge of the Jordan River on the Israel side. But they didn't. The ark, the moment they touched on the eastern side, while they're still in Chutz La'aretz, and the entire Jewish people cross, means that our connection to the land of Israel as a nation is not conditioned on Torah. Of course, we are commanded to keep the Torah. And of course, there's a symbiotic relationship, as we'll see, between our observance in Torah and our connection to the land and our success in the land. But it is not conditioned. There's this scene at the end of the chapter. The Jewish people are in the land of Israel. It's finally happened. And where's Torah? Torah and Hashem's revelation, or Hashem's presence, is still in Chutz La'aretz. It's an unimaginable scene. Yes?
So, Rabbi, I have to apologize because I'm leaving not because of what the rabbi said, but because I have to go at this point anyway.
Sure, no problem.
I just want to put something on the table, and then if there's more, I can listen to it afterwards, I suppose. But I thought I understood some concept about if we don't keep the Torah, we'll be expelled from the land. So
yes.
It still seems to be a relationship between...
Yes, I agree. I agree. There is definitely a symbiotic relationship, and we discuss it all the time. We say it every day in Shema. But on the most fundamental level, our connection to the land is its own independent connection. Of course.
Is this saying directly that the Torah does not need a specific physical space to subsist? It's saying that the Torah subsists and exists wherever it is, wherever it is studied.
There's the truth. The truth is there's a lot here. I mean, there's a lot. This scene, the way in which the chapter ends, without the Kohanim crossing over yet, and without the Jordan returning to flow fully, the fact that the chapter ends here is very, very disturbing, very, very thought-provoking, and there's a lot that needs to, and I'll leave that for each one of us to figure out. It's to try to understand its full meaning. But I think it's important to notice that the scene here is the Jewish people are on one side of the Jordan, and the Kohanim with the ark that has always, throughout the desert, the ark has been the symbol for the presence of God amongst the people, is not with them. It's on the other side. Maybe it's because we understand that God resides in the land of Israel even without the ark. Maybe. Either way. However, there's a very, very strong scene being described and says, okay, you can stop at this point. Before we continue, understand, the Jewish people have entered the land of Israel. But Torah is still outside the land of Israel. There is such a thing. There is such a thing as a Jewish people in the land of Israel, even without Torah. And you know what? If you want to come and complain that the first Zionists did not care too much about Torah, okay, we have here a model of saying that, yes, it is possible such a thing. Yes?
Yeah, that's what is the saying. It's happening today. People say that they make it aliyah. You fulfill your mission, you're Jew, you're there. But you don't have to be in Torah. Outside in the Golah, if you want to be Jew, you have to keep close to Torah.
Look, there is something to that. Meaning, I'm not trying to say that once a person makes aliyah, they should stop observing Torah and mitzvot. Of course not. But the mere fact that a Jew lives in Israel and is part of the communal identity, the collective of the Jewish people in the sovereign land of Israel, of kingdom of Israel, yes, meaning doesn't mean he should stop keeping Torah. But even if he stops keeping Torah, God forbid, he is still part of the Jewish collective by the mere fact that he lives in the land of Israel within the Jewish collective. And he speaks Hebrew, and he's part of the Jewish collective because he lives there, and he's settling the land and paying taxes in the state of Israel. Yes, you are Jewish by definition, by default, by living in the land of Israel as part of the Jewish collective. So, yes, there is something to that. Yes, Galina. And
the Torah is is touching their heels. You see?
But
the Torah is following.
Yes, but on the other side of the Jordan, not in Israel yet. Yes, Galina?
There is something that at the end of this chapter that all Israel crossing on ground on dragon until the entire nation. It just Israel switches to the nation.
Very nice. Very nice. Very nice. For those who didn't hear, I'll repeat that the last verse says that all of Israel passed until the whole nation. Meaning the moment they entered the land, suddenly they're transformed from Israel into nation. Very nice. I didn't notice that. Excellent point. Okay. Yes. Yes.
It's not saying also that people themselves can do miracles.
Yes.
And
yes.
Just help.
Yes. Versus when Moshe did it with his staff, the miracle. Right? Yes, the people themselves are the ones who triggered it. Yes, Sylvia?
Sorry, this was just something going back to the text. What happened at the bank of the Jordan is not exactly what the officials said, because they said that the ark had to go first, and the people had to say 2,000 cubits behind it. If the Kohanim stayed at the bank, the people went ahead of the ark, and they were closer than 2,000 cubits, because they had to pass the Kohanim.
It's a good point. So it could be that the answer is in maybe that those instructions are happening at an earlier stage. I'm not sure. It's a good point. It's a good question. I'm not sure I would have to look into it, and we'd have to look here at the Parshanim, at the commentators, to see how they make it all fit. So, I'm not sure. Okay. Shavuot Tov, everyone. What?
So next week. Yes.
didn't hear that first the priest come to water. Later, this whole nation started to move from tents to crossing Jordan. It's verse 13 and 14.
Wait, again, 13 and 14?
Yeah, it's 14, and then people started to go.
Right.
In 13, then they put their feet in the water.
Okay. Wait. I hear what you're saying. No, because 13 is Joshua describing to the people what is going to happen. And verse 15 is when it actually happens. Okay, wait, so Alex, what's happening next week?
Yeah, it's Limud FSU, so I'm not going to be here, and Aaron is going to Limud as well, so it's
okay.
No support.
Okay, so
That's one on Facebook.
So let's go under the assumption that next week, regretfully, we will not have a class. I will send out an email about it. I will send an email about it as well, just to confirm. But the default assumption right now is that there won't be a class next week. Okay, everyone have a Shavua Tov.
Well, Robert, Spitz, one other thing, we're talking about changing times.